Grace to you and peace. I always give thanks to God for all of you, and I mention you in our prayers, constantly remembering before our God and Father your work of faith and labor of love and steadfastness of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. That is how Paul begins his letter to the Thessalonians. Scholars say Paul is looking back, reflecting on all his visits to the churches and able to see how they're living out abundant faith, hope, and love. What Paul calls 3 signs of life. Paul's greeting reminded me of you. You know, I must admit, until I became bishop, I never paid attention to Paul's greetings. But now they fit over and over what I see when I visit you. I'm happy to say that as I convene my 3rd diocesan convention as your bishop, I do see very strong signs of life all over our faith communities, all over. Our churches, large and small, are rebounding and they're growing in wonderful and surprising ways, creative ways. We have emerged from the lockdown through all of its ups and downs, its stops and starts, into a new chapter of sharing the gospel of Jesus. And we have many things to be grateful for and much to celebrate. Since my first convention began in the earliest days of lockdown, I have been able to watch where we started and how you've adapted and you've rebuilt and you are creating new and life-giving ways to share the gospel of Jesus that we never even thought about before the pandemic. Since last convention, Bishop Pryor and I have visited 80 of our 87 churches. And all our faith communities, our worshiping communities, and camp, sometimes more than once. And we've seen all of your innovation and energy turn from COVID management to inviting and welcoming old and new friends, seekers and strangers to your communities. One of the best things about being bishop continues to be getting to see your home base and look at the ministries that have captured your heart. At convention, I hope you'll get a glimpse of a much bigger picture of the Diocese of Alabama and a taste of our common life, and that you'll see how much Jesus is working in all of our churches and beyond. Our theme for convention is Deep Roots and New Growth, inspired by God's words to Jeremiah. And so I went to Eugene Peterson, and this is his translation of the verse. Those who trust God shall be like trees that are planted in Eden, putting down roots near the rivers, never a worry through the hottest of summers, never dropping a leaf, serene and calm through the droughts, bearing fresh fruit every season. This year we celebrated 150 years of ministry at the Cathedral Church of the Advent, 20 years of deacons service in our diocese, 30 years of Sawyerville ministry, and 100 years of summer camping, eventually leading to Camp McDowell. Last Sunday I met with 9 churches from our Black Belt. It was a great meeting. They have great refreshments. Most of those churches date back to the very beginning of the diocese in the 1830s. We have many, many reasons to believe that we have deep roots. As I travel the highways and byways that lead me to you each Sunday, I see that deep root and I see that fruit, and I'm always proud of you. I can see how hard you are working and how challenging it has really been. I know there have been heartbreaking losses and a lot of setbacks. Still, I see your faith and the love of Jesus shining through and holding us and helping us and making us one body. This year, I have traveled many, many places, some that I don't want to go back to, and they're not on this continent. Because of COVID postponements, we had both Lambeth Conference and our General Convention in Baltimore within about 7 days of each other. Lambeth Conference is a once every 10 years meeting of the Worldwide Anglican Communion. Some 650 bishops and that's a lot of bishops. You would think they would make a law or something. 650 bishops, 450 spouses, and from 165 countries met in Canterbury, near where the Archbishop has home base. We had 12 days of worship and Bible study and discussion, and we talked about everything from world hunger, climate crisis, to the Anglican identity, all in an attempt to deepen understanding and to support each other's churches across a multitude of cultures and contexts. I've written about all this in another place, but what I'd like you to take away that although it was exhausting, it was emotional, it was very worthwhile, and it was a great blessing to represent you. Bill and I really loved doing that and telling people that we were from Alabama, and they would say, "Where is that?" The Anglican Church, of which we are just a tiny part, is alive and growing. The American Church has a very big role in that communion because we've reached out to so many across the globe and built relationships. My most powerful learning for the 2 weeks was that although our languages and skin colors are varied, and our contexts for ministry and our customs are just incredibly diverse, the love of Jesus can bridge all those differences and make the experience make sense. A network of common love can transcend global politics. It can encourage cooperation for Jesus' sake when all else fails, and that is just one big reason why we should really remain active there. Just before I left for England, we had our General Convention in Baltimore, which was abbreviated, if you can believe it, into 4.5 days. Bishop Pryor and I had a good old time there. It was very, very chaotic. Can you believe that? Some of it was confusing, yet there were some very redeeming moments that I will share. I appreciate the work of our deputation. I know I saw some of them sitting in the back, and the good news is we get to have another convention sooner than 3 years. We get to have another convention in 2024, and we will be nominating and electing our delegation this afternoon and tomorrow. I hope you'll think really seriously about serving. This convention, I understand, will be 7 days long, and I hope we learn that we can constructively condense the business, but we're still in search of that perfect convention. At this General Convention, we will elect a new presiding bishop. Speaking of presiding bishops, my cousin and brother, Michael, who I love dearly, I really do, visited us in May of this past year, and it was just amazing. Revival revived us all, and from all I've heard from you, it came at exactly the right time. On my challenging days, I remember how it looked and felt to see all of your banners coming in to Birmingham Southern, into the arena. Well, it brought tears to many eyes. If you missed it, we still have it up on the website. Bishop Curry can preach, and his message rings true. Let's see. If it's not about love,
it's not about God.
See, isn't that great? Every preacher in the room is going, why didn't I think of that? I will never forget his time with our young people at All Saints. They asked him very hard and very direct questions like, tell us about growing up. Tell us about a very hard time that you had. How did you get through it? Or how was it to grow up as a black man where you lived? They were very courageous. And then they said, tell us how you found God. The youth simply reflected the good formation that they've gotten in all their churches. Our youth are hungry, and they're curious, and they're devoted. His breakfast with clergy and the ECW, Episcopal Church Women, for those that don't know that acronym, was also a great blessing, and it was a shot in the arm for all of us. The music at the revival was inspiring and beautiful. The witness talks from our presenters gave us a glimpse, just a glimpse, of the depth and breadth of our work together. I so appreciate everyone who helped us make that day so wonderful. There are so many to thank. I hope we can do it again with or without Bishop Curry. That Bishop Curry, the other one. We saw the power of us coming together to share what God's doing in each life. And that's what revives us. Our clergy and laity became overnight televangelists and YouTube teachers, and even though everyone is completely back to in-person worship, our careers on the internet are still growing. Is our theology big enough to accommodate our virtual communities and congregations? Those people we've discovered who maybe never cross our thresholds. That's something we have to figure out. As amazing as it sounds, all of that, I think, is here to stay. COVID just simply gave us a chance to look at it. In responding to COVID, a new kind of church has been born, and we've got a lot to figure out. Our teaching, our preaching, meeting virtually will continue, and it will change. We'll get better at it. We'll understand how to make it work. We're blessed with hardworking, creative, determined, inspired, and very faithful clergy. And I am very proud of their selfless love for Jesus and for their flocks. They have given everything they've got to keep their churches, their communities going. And I hope that all of you notice that, and I want them to know that I'm very grateful to them. Everyone has worked together to relentlessly feed the hungry and the lost in Wednesday night car lines or pop-up food banks or food trucks and more. I don't think I knew what a blessing box was until COVID. You've organized everything: clothing drives, food giveaways, sing-alongs. You've helped with utilities and gas and rent. Name it, we've tried it. You've become nimble and responsive to circumstances in unbelievable ways. Our churches have seen their home communities as a mission field, and they've responded with generous hearts, and you become more engaged in the community outside your parish as a result. How could you help it? Our youth ministry has been phenomenal. They were sort of hid away, and now they've rebounded with giant camp events, 2 happenings, 110 kids at Christmas conference, and very little problem with COVID. Youth also attended a Province 4 leadership event, and we added a new diocesan service day with Rise Against Hunger. Campus ministry has continued to regroup and grow. I think what we're learning is that our strongest campus ministry happens when it's directly connected to a parish. The terrible financial forecasts that were predicted, thankfully, has not materialized, and thanks to very careful planning and your extraordinary generosity, even with inflation, we're all emerging in a healthy place and able to help some of our more vulnerable and smaller communities. This past Sunday, I was in Selma at St. Paul's, where everyone there is reeling and recovering from a violent tornado, as you know, that destroyed lots of homes, schools, churches, and businesses in both the richest and the poorest areas. In this, they were all alike. The difference was the richest areas had insurance and the poorest did not. St. Paul's itself was spared, but every parish member lost something. We blessed their new Gamble house across the street from the church, which was made to lodge space people who are coming to Selma on pilgrimage, and now they're using it to house first responders and work crews. Isn't it interesting how they built the space and they needed it right away, or they renovated it and needed it right away? They will need help for a long time, months, years, and resources for those without insurance, because they need to help rebuild the community that made the town strong. We have a link up on our website for support. The greater gifts financially have continued to come from your determined generosity. You continue to give sacrificially to your parishes and the diocese also to support our mission and ministry. And when I say thank you, it never seems like it's enough, but I do thank you, and I also thank God for your generosity. Your generosity and the dedication of your lay and clergy leaders has helped many churches and their end their year financially whole, and we can look ahead with hopeful and creative spirits, and that's something to celebrate. In April, the Standing Committee, the Commission on Ministry, and the Diocesan Council, all those things we're going to be talking about in election, they met together, all together here at camp, and led by Bishop Pryor, they considered their work for the coming year, and they agreed that the purpose of the diocese is to be a resource, not just a regulatory body, a resource, a group of people who come together as a team to help people who need us, so that our parishes can witness to the love of Jesus around us and through us. They organized this group, this governing body group, their work around 4 areas that wherever I go seem to represent both our strengths and our challenges, and the directions we affirmed last year are viewed through these 4 lenses. The first one is leadership development. Last convention, I promised to strengthen our leadership with both Bishop Pryor and the Reverend Jeff Evans, and they both just had their 1st anniversary, and we're glad that they are here. I'll say more about Brian in a minute, but I am grateful to Brian and Stacy, and I don't know where Stacy is, but she's probably off doing something. They're a team that has helped us a lot, and they have built our leadership capacity across the diocese. We're advertising and recruiting for Alabama all over the country. And we're encouraging more people to enter our discernment processes. I'm happy to report that we're making significant progress. We spent clergy conference with faculty on adaptive leadership, and we're introducing Leading in Hope to our newest clergy. We have had 2 what we call Explorers Days for those who are interested in discernment, considering ordained service, and a total of 48 people from 26 parishes attended. They get to ask questions about what it's like to live as an ordained person. We currently have 15 postulants and candidates for holy orders in process. That's an increase of 2 from last year, and several of those are in alternative training. Alternative training for ordained ministry is a rapidly changing area of the church. All over the country, all over the world, the training's changing. Most of our students are enrolled at Swanee's program at the moment, and we have 2 at Bexley Seabury. But all the seminaries are offering low residency training, and while we can explore new ways to educate, we can't compromise preparation. Residential seminary is still the norm, but virtual life has entered in a strong way, motivated and encouraged by COVID, to make things very interesting. I'm grateful to the Reverend Canon Kelly Hudlow for working closely with all our clergy and postulants to help them go through this time and get ready to lead. The Commission on Ministry has been incredibly active. Polly Robb has been a great chairwoman. We're checking our assumptions, we're asking all kinds of questions, we're thinking outside the box, and that group gets together. It's a big group of very devoted people, and they're looking at lay and ordained work. And this year we will have 2 cycles of BACM, the Bishop's Advisory Committee, y'all probably know that, on ministry. And they advise bishops about who should go or who's prepared to go, who feels the call. And we'll have 2 cycles of active shepherding this year, not just one, to try to accommodate more interest. The second area, congregational vitality, this is an idea that I think you heard articulated in Sam Wells' offering last year, and you'll also hear some of that from Jason Biasy, our speaker this year, who's sitting right here. I'll introduce him eventually. What makes a congregation vital and vibrant? Is it sharing? Is it the sharing of the gospel that brings life to those inside and outside? Is that happening? Is the ministry inside attractive to those who are outside? How has COVID changed us? These are the questions we ask. Each parish context is very different. But I'm always wondering how we best can support your ministry. And is your ministry vital to the community where it's located, that you call home? We're finding that when the diocesan staff as a team can partner, come alongside with people in their parishes to strengthen their connection to the community and their outreach ministry and their offerings to children and youth, that things start to happen. 2 years ago, we began more deliberately considering each parish's circumstance, asking, what are your barriers to vitality? Tell us, what do you think? How can we help overcome those? We've encouraged small church, large church partnership. Some of you are doing that now. Mission and outreach parish grants have stimulated amazing ministries. St. Catherine's in Chelsea took $2,500 to fund a Halloween fair for children with disabilities, and now that is a tradition, and their yards are filled with children with disabilities. St. Peter's in Talladega leveraged their grant into a choral scholars program that's revitalizing Talladega's town music. So many good stories to tell. Clergy leadership is often directly related to vitality. We've taken aim at that issue, not with a shotgun, but with something more direct. And we work every day to build more ordained and lay support for those who need it. Last year at convention time, we had 14 vacancies in rector or associate rector positions. And this year, I'm happy to report we have 4 vacancies. We expect to fill the, yeah, it's amazing. We have every reason to believe that we will fill those 4 this year. We're making progress, but those of you who haven't yet been touched, we haven't forgotten you. We're not there yet. We also studied, at your request, salary equity issues, and we found that our salary differences are actually related to where you're serving, like parish size. They're not related to gender or race. Larger churches are able to pay higher salaries than smaller churches. So once someone goes somewhere to serve after their first couple of years out of seminary, their salary can move in ways that the diocese doesn't control. I'm happy to share details with those who raised those questions last year offline if you want to see them. I know that we've met with many of you already, but I just want to be sure that you know that we looked at it. Last year we had 45 parishes being served by retired clergy, and this year that number is 24, with 17 parishes served solely by supply clergy. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have some parishes that would rather not be served by supply clergy. We do. My point is, we're finding that when we develop an individualized plan for every parish according to their context, that works best. So deliberately, thoughtfully, that's what we're trying to do. I want us to develop a process so when a transition happens, we know the best way to help that group of leaders. I want to say thank you to Jeff Evans and Brian Pryor in particular, who work on this all the time, and there's a team with them that I'm afraid I'm leaving out. So thank you for everybody who's helped us get to the point we are now. Racial healing. This began as an effort to energize ministries that help us share God's reconciling love with a priority on racial reconciliation. To build on the fine work of 30 years of Sawyerville, the excellent leadership of the Commission on Truth, Justice, and Racial Reconciliation, I wanted us to support the many sacred ground groups that are popped up in our parishes, expand our education and training, and do more to be part of the legacy in Montgomery and Hayneville and Selma. To that end, the task force that I appointed on Becoming Beloved Community worked for 10 months to study how we might strengthen our ministry around racial reconciliation. I'll tell you more detail about that tomorrow, but they finished their work and made some recommendations. This summer we had 187 youth from all around the diocese in Hale County staff Sawyerville. We had 12 that participated in person-to-person, and 250 came together from all over the country. 250 people came together, and it was hot, from all over the country to walk the Jonathan Daniels pilgrimage this summer. We also named our first missioner in racial healing and pilgrimage, Miss Brianna Mitchell. Don't know where Bree is. She's probably busy working, to help us respond to the growing mission of pilgrimage that has come to the state of Alabama, particularly to Montgomery and Selma and Hayneville and parts around the civil rights movement itself. Great progress, but more to come. Sometimes our deep roots in the geography of the Black Belt yields a chance to help communities that we don't see all the time in unexpected ways. This year we partnered with the Black Belt citizens in Uniontown to provide water filters. Many of you people bought those. Provide water filters to the residents free of charge. These filters for some are an answer to prayer. Can you imagine not being able to have clean water just because you turn it on? So far we've given away over 50. They cost $400 each. We're able to show love in this way. As one happy recipient who wrote us said, "In my home, I am a caretaker of 2 elderly gentlemen with dementia, and it's not easy. Access to clean water sure does mean a lot." Camp McDowell, the 4th area. Camp McDowell is a beloved resource for parishes in the diocese and a vital part of our identity. And man, it has been through some ups and downs in the past 2 years. One of my first early meetings as Bishop Coadjutor was on a finance call about what to do about camp with everything going shut. I'm happy to report it is now stable, it has emerged, it has rebounded, and it's even excelled. Bishop Pryor's leadership in working with me and working with Camp McDowell has been tremendous. You'll see some of the numbers later today and tomorrow. Let's say this: the camp listening process and the leadership of Bishop Brian Pryor has been essential and life-giving to this ministry. Brian was just given Hero of Camping Ministry Award from the Episcopal Camp and Conference Center. He knows something about it. He's been at it a long time. I love having his help. We have learned much. We'll continue to learn more. To date, 31,000 people came to camp in 2022. We're almost back to 2019 numbers. We're just almost there, just a couple of hundred people. 2019 numbers of 1,400 in summer camp. And camp received last year $171,000 in grants. They have someone working with them doing that all the time now. Thanks to their leaders, and you'll hear more from them. Watching and walking with you this year, I want to also thank our larger churches for their leadership in reaching out to share their resources. They're very generous, not only with their money, but with their ideas, with their clergy, with their lay leaders, and they've stepped up in all kinds of ways. They got it. This is a network, and we need to help everybody in the network do better. At the same time, I want to applaud everyone's willingness to experiment and try new things. Don't stop doing that. That's the only way that the church is going to change, is if we are willing to try new things and experiment. And I don't mean change for the worse. I mean change for the better. Serving the needs of communities is critical to vitality. COVID opened us to new ways and has helped us ask new questions. You've taught me that asking for help, planning for the future, personally inviting someone to church every Sunday, having engaging music, developing a feeding program, collaborating with other denominations, investing in some technology are just a few of the ways that the good news will spread. As I believe our speaker will remind us, and I'm going to quote him, God's gifts are not for God's people. They are through God's people for everyone else. God's gifts are the sort you cannot keep. You have to give them away, and then they always replenish. Thinking about God's gifts leads me to mention one of our most painful, yet most tender and powerful experiences of Jesus' love in the body of Christ this past year. We all know that St. Stephen's lost 3 dear people June 16th, and the 3, Bart, Sharon, and Jane, were definitely gifts from God. They gave themselves faithfully to serve so many. In the middle of serving, they were senselessly killed. Immediately, the people across our diocese, our church, and beyond responded with love, prayers, presents, money, flowers, ribbons, food. And the really wonderful thing is that it was reciprocal with the people of St. Stephen's. The parish opened itself to receive and return the love. It was uncharted territory for all of us. But I want to thank their clergy. I want to thank all the clergy, the ones that were in the parking lot praying, the ones that showed up everywhere. I want to thank the counselors that came to help, the lay leadership. And I want to thank St. Stephen's for leading the way. Much healing has happened and much transformation. We've been changed by June 16th, and I dare to say God is helping us love each other in different ways. I'm grateful to everyone. St. Stephen's has a memorial that is being planned and will be built soon, and my cousin and brother, Presiding Bishop Curry, will come here on June 16th to dedicate and to remember. So we'll give you more information about that as it opens up. I read about a preacher who received his very first communion when he was 10 years old. Was when you had to be confirmed before you got it. He described himself as an anxious kid who was very worried about taking communion because he wanted to do it right. And after all, he knew it was really, really important. It was very mysterious. And so by the time he knelt at the altar, he'd worked himself into a cry. Being 10, he was embarrassed that he couldn't stop the tears rolling down his face. And well, the bishop, coming down the row, saw the tears, and as he handed him the wafer, he stopped. And he wiped the boy's cheek, and he touched his head. And as the author puts it, in a gesture of blessing, I didn't see him offer any other kid, and in that moment, I fell into God. He goes on to say, I have spent the last 40 years as a minister living the results of that moment. We are all here now because sometime or another we fell into God. Most of us have done it over and over. We're bound together by the reconciling love of Jesus Christ, who saves us and gives us a kingdom where love reigns. We're blessed to share that love with a world that needs that story desperately. And when we testify to the hope that is in us, that's all we have to do, because amazing, life-giving, life-saving love of Jesus gets unleashed, and the world's a better place. Last year, Sam Wells told us that God would restore the years the locust had eaten, and that we already have everything we need. I know we have still many challenges, but new life and new growth is happening. And as Paul tells the Thessalonians when he ends his letter, may the Lord direct our hearts to the love of God and to the steadfastness of Christ. And I want to thank you for sharing your ministry with me, and I am honored to be your bishop. Amen.